The morning Olivia Grace Taylor turned 12, she never imagined that 3 months later she would be standing alone at the edge of the forbidden Blackwood Forest, a tattered backpack slung over her shoulder and tears streaming down her face. The entire town of Maplewood had warned children to stay away from these woods and the monster who lived deep within them. But tonight, Olivia had nowhere else to go. "Please, don't do this," Olivia whispered, her breath forming small clouds. In the October air, the social worker, Ms. Winters, looked down at her clipboard rather than meeting Olivia's eyes. "I'm sorry, Olivia. The emergency foster placement fell through, and there's simply nowhere else available tonight. You'll stay at the group home." "In Westridge until Monday," Ms. Winters said, checking her watch impatiently. "The van is waiting." Olivia clutched her backpack tighter, feeling the weight of her entire life reduced to a few belongings. 3 months ago, she'd been a normal 6th grader with loving parents. Then came the crash that took them both, leaving her alone in the world with no relatives willing to claim her. The system had shuffled her through 3 temporary homes already, each worse than the last. The group home in Westridge was notorious. Kids called it the warehouse because children were stored there like unwanted inventory. Olivia had heard the stories of abuse, neglect, and worse. She couldn't go there. She wouldn't. When Ms. Winters turned to answer her ringing phone, Olivia made her decision. She ran. Through the town park, past the elementary school where her mother had once taught music, beyond the cemetery where her parents now rested, and toward the one place no one would follow, Blackwood Forest. Every child in Maplewood grew up hearing tales of the mountain man, a giant, wild-eyed hermit who lived deep in the forest, who lured children with candy or puppies before devouring them whole. Parents used the stories to keep their children close, to prevent them from wandering into the dense, often dangerous woods. "Stay away from Blackwood Forest," they warned. "The mountain man will get you." But as Olivia stood at the forest's edge, the darkness ahead seemed less frightening than the fate waiting behind her. With one last look at the twinkling lights of the town she once called home, she stepped between the ancient trees and disappeared into the shadows. The forest was alive with night sounds, the hoot of owls, the rustle of leaves, the occasional snap of twigs from unseen creatures. Olivia's heart pounded as she used the flashlight on her keychain to guide her deeper into the woods. She had no plan beyond escape, no destination except away. After what felt like hours, her legs burning and lungs aching from the climb, Olivia stumbled upon a narrow deer trail that wound upward through the trees. The mountain loomed dark against the night sky, but something compelled her forward, upward, away from the world that had failed her so completely. Near midnight, exhausted and disoriented, Olivia spotted a faint glow through the trees. Moving cautiously toward it, she found herself at the edge of a small clearing. In its center stood a cabin, sturdy and well-maintained, with warm light spilling from its windows and smoke curling from the stone chimney. This must be where he lived, the mountain man, the monster from her childhood nightmares. Olivia should have run. Every story, every warning told her to flee. But she was cold, hungry, and desperate. Perhaps she could just peek through a window, see if the tales were true. Maybe the cabin was empty, or belonged to a normal forest ranger or hiker. Gathering her courage, she crept toward the nearest window and peered inside. What she saw made her gasp. Instead of the bone-strewn lair of a child-eating monster, she saw a cozy living space with handmade furniture, shelves lined with books, and walls adorned with intricate wooden carvings. And there, seated in a rocking chair by the fire, was a man, not a monstrous giant, but an ordinary-looking person reading a book with a pair of glasses perched on his nose. At his feet lay 3 puppies, snuggled together on a cushion, occasionally stretching or yawning as the man reached down to gently stroke their fur. Olivia was so transfixed by this unexpected scene that she didn't notice the loose stone beneath her foot. When she shifted her weight, it rolled away with a clatter. The man's head snapped up, his eyes immediately finding hers through the window. Olivia froze, terror gripping her heart. Instead of roaring or charging at her, the man simply looked surprised. After a moment, he set down his book, rose from his chair, and moved toward the door. Olivia's instincts finally kicked in. She turned to run, but in her panic, her foot caught on an exposed root. She crashed to the ground with a cry of pain as her ankle twisted beneath her. The cabin door opened, spilling light across the clearing. The man emerged, a tall figure silhouetted against the golden glow. "Are you all right?" he called, his voice neither monstrous nor threatening, but concerned. Olivia tried to stand, but her ankle gave way. Tears sprang to her eyes from pain and fear. The man approached slowly, as one might approach a wounded animal. Now that he was closer, Olivia could see him clearly, a man perhaps in his 40s. With a neatly trimmed beard, streaked with gray, wearing a simple flannel shirt and jeans. His eyes, far from wild or cruel, looked kind and worried. "You've hurt yourself," he said, keeping a respectful distance. "I have a first aid kit inside. Would you let me help you?" Olivia hesitated, years of warnings echoing in her mind. But her ankle throbbed painfully. The night was growing colder, and she had nowhere else to go. "Are you going to eat me?" she blurted out, immediately regretting how childish it sounded. The man's eyebrows shot up in surprise, then his face softened with understanding. "Ah," he said quietly, "you've heard the stories." He crouched down to her level, still maintaining space between them. "My name is Gabriel Thorne. I'm not a monster, and I don't eat children or anyone else. I'm just a man who prefers the forest to the town. Now, what's your name?" "Olivia," she replied cautiously. "Olivia Taylor." "Well, Olivia Taylor, it's nearly midnight, and you're deep in the woods with an injured ankle. Whatever brought you here must have been serious. I promise. I mean you no harm. Will you let me help you?" Something in his calm demeanor, the gentle rumble of his voice, made Olivia nod despite her fear. Gabriel approached carefully and helped her to her feet, supporting her weight as she hobbled toward the cabin. Inside, the space was even more inviting than it had appeared through the window. The fire crackled warmly, and the puppies looked up with curious eyes at the newcomer. One, braver than the others, waddled over to sniff at Olivia's shoes. "That's Daisy," Gabriel said, helping Olivia to a comfortable chair. "The black one is Shadow, and the smallest is Peanut. Their mother was a stray who died shortly after giving birth. I've been hand-raising them." As Gabriel carefully examined her ankle, Olivia's eyes wandered around the cabin. Every surface showcased beautiful craftsmanship, intricately carved. Figurines, polished wooden bowls, and furniture that looked like it belonged in a magazine. "It's just a sprain," Gabriel announced. "Let me wrap it for you." While he worked, Olivia gathered her courage. "Why do people say you eat children?" Gabriel's hands paused briefly, then resumed their gentle wrapping. "People fear what they don't understand," he said simply. "And sometimes they prefer a convenient monster to the truth." "What truth?" Gabriel secured the bandage and sat back on his heels. "That's a long story, and you look exhausted. Are you hungry?" As if on cue, Olivia's stomach growled loudly. She hadn't eaten since breakfast at the foster home, before they'd told her to pack her things. Gabriel smiled and moved to the small kitchen area. "I have vegetable soup that I made this morning. Would that be all right?" Olivia nodded, still wary but increasingly curious about this man who seemed nothing like the monster of town legend. As she ate the delicious homemade soup, Gabriel busied himself making up a small bed on the couch, giving her space and time. The puppies had grown bolder, and Peanut, the smallest, had climbed into her lap while she ate. "They're good judges of character," Gabriel remarked, noticing her gentle handling of the tiny creature. When Olivia had finished eating and the makeshift bed was prepared, Gabriel sat in the chair opposite her, his expression growing serious. "Olivia, I need to ask, does anyone know you're here? Are your parents looking for you?" The question pierced through the momentary comfort she'd found. Tears welled in her eyes before she could stop them, spilling down her cheeks in hot trails. "My parents died 3 months ago," she managed between sobs. "Car accident. There's no one looking for me except maybe a social worker who wants to dump me at the warehouse." Understanding dawned on Gabriel's face. "The group home in Westridge?" Olivia nodded miserably. "I ran away. I couldn't go there. The kids who come out, they're never the same." Gabriel was quiet for a long moment, watching as Peanut nuzzled against Olivia's hand, seeking to comfort her in the instinctive way of animals. "You can stay here tonight," he said finally. "In the morning, we'll figure out what comes next. For now, you're safe." Those 3 words, "you're safe," broke something open inside Olivia. Since the moment police officers had appeared at her classroom door 3 months ago, she hadn't felt safe anywhere. The sobs came harder now, years of being the strong, brave girl crumbling under the simple kindness of a stranger. Gabriel didn't rush to comfort her or tell her not to cry. He simply sat quietly, a steady presence, until the storm of her grief subsided. "Why would you help me?" Olivia asked eventually, wiping her eyes on her sleeve. "You don't even know me." "Sometimes people need help," Gabriel replied. "And sometimes helping others is how we help ourselves." That night, tucked under warm blankets with Peanut curled against her side, Olivia slept deeply for the first time since losing her parents. Whatever tomorrow might bring, tonight she was warm-fed, and as her heavy eyelids closed, she realized, unafraid. Morning came with golden light filtering through the cabin windows and the smell of something delicious cooking. Olivia woke disoriented, momentarily confused by the unfamiliar surroundings. Then the events of the previous night came rushing back: her escape, the forest, the cabin, and Gabriel Thorne, the supposed monster who had shown her nothing but kindness. She sat up carefully, testing her ankle. It was still sore, but the swelling had gone down considerably. Peanut, who had remained her faithful companion through the night, yawned and stretched beside her. Gabriel stood at the small stove, his back to her as he flipped what looked like pancakes in a cast-iron skillet. Outside the window behind him, Olivia could now see the true beauty of where she had stumbled upon in the darkness. The cabin sat on a small plateau partway up the mountain, overlooking a breathtaking vista of forest that stretched to the distant town of Maplewood, just visible as a cluster of tiny buildings. "Good morning," Gabriel said, turning with a smile. "How's the ankle?" "Better," Olivia replied, still somewhat shy in the light of day. "Thank you for helping me." Gabriel nodded and slid a stack of blueberry pancakes onto a plate. "Hungry?" Olivia's stomach answered with a growl, making Gabriel chuckle as he set the plate before her, along with a bottle of real maple syrup. "After breakfast," Gabriel said, joining her with his own plate, "we should talk about what happens next." The pancakes were the best Olivia had ever tasted, light and fluffy with wild blueberries, bursting with flavor. As she ate, she studied Gabriel more carefully in the daylight. He was tall and lean, with strong hands that showed the calluses of someone who worked with them constantly. His face, framed by the salt and pepper beard, was weathered but not unkind, with laugh lines around his eyes suggesting he had once smiled more often. "Why do you live up here all alone?" Olivia asked between bites. Gabriel seemed to consider his answer carefully. "I needed peace. The forest provides that. And the stories about you eating children, where did those come from?" A shadow crossed Gabriel's face. "People need their monsters, Olivia. It makes them feel safer to believe that evil has a face, a name, a specific place in the woods where it lurks. The truth is often more complicated and harder to accept." "What is the truth?" Gabriel set down his fork and looked at her directly. I once had a family. A wife named Eleanor and a daughter, Lily. She would have been about your age now. The past tense wasn't lost on Olivia. What happened to them? There was a fire, Gabriel said quietly, in our home in Maplewood. I wasn't there, I was working late at my furniture workshop in town. By the time I arrived, it was too late. Olivia's heart clenched with sympathy. She knew all too well the sudden, irrevocable loss of family. I'm sorry, she whispered. Gabriel nodded, acknowledging her empathy. After the fire, there were rumors, questions about how it started. Some people in town, people who had never liked that Eleanor married me instead of the mayor's son, suggested I might have had something to do with it. Olivia's eyes widened. But that's awful. Why would they think that? Fear and grief make people irrational, Gabriel replied. They needed someone to blame. I was different. I'd always preferred solitude, spent time in the woods hunting and foraging. It was easier to believe I was capable of something terrible than to accept that sometimes tragedy just happens. So you came up here? Yes, I couldn't bear to stay in a town that looked at me with suspicion and fear. I bought this land, built this cabin, and made a new life. I still sell my woodwork through a dealer in the next county. I have everything I need. Except people, Olivia said softly. Gabriel's smile was tinged with sadness. I have occasional visitors, hikers who've lost their way, the park ranger who checks on the forest. And now I have you, at least for today. The reminder of her uncertain future hung heavy in the air. You can't stay here permanently, Gabriel said gently. I have no legal right to keep you, and despite what you've heard about the warehouse, running away isn't the answer. Tears stung Olivia's eyes. You don't understand. The last foster home, the man there, She trailed off, unable to voice the memory of wandering hands and locked bedroom doors. Understanding dawned on Gabriel's face, followed by a flash of anger quickly controlled. Did you tell your social worker? Olivia shook her head. She wouldn't believe me, Mr. Peterson is a respected member of the community. She mimicked Ms. Winter's dismissive tone. Besides, there's nowhere else to place me right now. Gabriel was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Finally, he rose and moved to a small desk in the corner, returning with a notepad and pen. I know someone who might be able to help, he said, writing something down. Her name is Judge Martha Sullivan. She and Eleanor were friends in college, and she never believed the rumors about me. She works in family court in Riverside County. He tore off the page and handed it to Olivia. If we can get you to her, she might be able to ensure you're placed somewhere safe, somewhere better than the warehouse. Hope flickered in Olivia's chest for the first time in months. You'd do that for me? Of course, Gabriel said simply. No child deserves to feel unsafe. As they finished breakfast, Gabriel explained his plan. They would hike down the mountain on a little-known trail that would bring them to a road, where an old friend who delivered Gabriel's woodwork to shops would meet them. From there, they could reach Riverside County without going through Maplewood, where someone might recognize Olivia. But first, Gabriel said, I need to take care of my morning routine. Would you like to join me? Curious, Olivia followed. Gabriel outside, careful on her tender ankle. The morning air was crisp and clear, carrying the scent of pine and earth. Gabriel led her to a small shed at the edge of the clearing, where he removed a large sack of dog food and several containers. This way, he said, following a narrow path into the woods. After a short walk, they reached another small clearing. Gabriel set down his burden and let out a low whistle. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, from various directions came the soft padding of paws on forest floor. Dogs appeared, at least a dozen of them. Some looked like former pets, others clearly born wild. All approached Gabriel with wagging tails and eager eyes. "These are the strays of Blackwood Forest," Gabriel explained as he poured food into bowls and filled others with fresh water. "Some were abandoned, others ran away. Or got lost. I make sure they're fed and healthy." Olivia watched in amazement as Gabriel greeted each dog by name, checking some for injuries, slipping medicine into food for others. The animals clearly adored him, pressing against his legs for attention, accepting his care with grateful eyes. "Every morning at dawn," Gabriel continued, "I come out to feed them. Some eventually trust me enough to come to the cabin, like the mother of those puppies you met. She was heavily pregnant and sick when I found her. I couldn't save her, but her puppies survived." "Is this why people see you in the forest early in the morning?" Olivia asked, beginning to understand. "They see you with dogs and think." "That I'm luring children with puppies," Gabriel finished with a sad smile. "Yes, I imagine that's part of how the stories grew. People see what they expect to see." As they walked back to the cabin, Olivia felt a growing sense of injustice. This kind man had lost everything, been wrongfully accused, and driven from his home. Yet instead of becoming bitter, he quietly helped creatures that others had abandoned. "You should tell people the truth," she said suddenly. "Clear your name." Gabriel shook his head. "I tried in the beginning, but grief and rumor had already taken root. Besides, I've found peace here. It's enough." But Olivia wasn't convinced it was enough. As they prepared for their journey, packing a small bag with water and food, she kept thinking about the unfairness of it all. About how quickly people turned on those who were different, how easily they believed the worst. It reminded her of her last foster home, where Mrs. Peterson had refused to believe that her husband was anything less than a saint, despite the evidence right in front of her. People believed what was convenient, what fit their worldview, not necessarily what was true. By mid-morning, they were ready to depart. Gabriel had fashioned a walking stick to help Olivia manage the trail with her injured ankle. The puppies watched from their cushion by the fire, too young for such a journey. "Will they be okay while you're gone?" Olivia asked worriedly. "They'll be fine for the day," Gabriel assured her. "They have food, water, and a warm place to sleep. We should be back by nightfall." The hike down the mountain was challenging but beautiful. Gabriel pointed out edible plants, animal tracks, and the subtle signs of changing seasons that most people would miss. He moved through the forest with the easy confidence of someone completely at home in the wilderness, occasionally supporting Olivia when the path grew steep or her ankle protested. As they walked, Olivia shared stories of her parents, her father's terrible jokes, her mother's beautiful singing voice, the camping trips they'd taken each summer. Gabriel listened attentively, asking questions that showed he was truly interested, not just being polite. In turn, he told her about Eleanor's passion for painting, how she'd covered their small house with colorful landscapes and portraits. He spoke of Lily's determination to climb every tree in their yard, her collection of interesting rocks, her dream of becoming a veterinarian. "She would have loved your puppies," Olivia said. "Yes," Gabriel agreed softly, "she would have." By early afternoon, they reached the road where Gabriel's friend was to meet them. Right on time, an old blue pickup truck rumbled around the bend, driven by a weathered-looking man with a gray ponytail. "Gabe," the man called, climbing out with a smile that faltered when he noticed Olivia. "Who's this?" "Frank, this is Olivia," Gabriel said. "She needs our help getting to Judge Sullivan in Riverside." Frank's eyebrows rose, but he asked no questions. "The judge, huh? Hop in then. We've got a bit of a drive ahead of us." As they settled into the truck, Olivia felt a strange mix of hope and fear. Judge Sullivan might help her find a safe place to live, or she might send her straight back to the warehouse. Gabriel seemed to sense her anxiety and gave her shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "Martha is fair and kind," he said quietly. "She listened to you." The drive took nearly 2 hours. winding through beautiful countryside that gradually gave way to suburbs and finally the small city of Riverside. Frank remained mostly silent, occasionally exchanging observations about the weather or wildlife with Gabriel, but never prying into Olivia's situation. When they finally pulled up in front of the courthouse, Olivia's nerves threatened to overwhelm her. What if the judge was too busy? What if she didn't believe Olivia's story? What if she called Miss Winters immediately? "I'll be with you," Gabriel promised as they climbed the courthouse steps, every step of the way. The massive building was intimidating with its marble columns and echoing hallways. People in suits rushed past, clutching folders and looking harried. Gabriel approached a receptionist, speaking in low tones and mentioning Eleanor's name. After a phone call, they were directed to wait on a bench outside a set of heavy wooden doors. "Judge Sullivan is in a hearing," Gabriel explained. See us when she's finished." The wait felt eternal. Olivia's mind raced with all the possible outcomes, most of them ending with her back at Mr. Peterson's house or worse, the warehouse. She clutched the edge of the bench until her knuckles turned white. "Breathe," Gabriel reminded her gently. "Whatever happens, you've already shown incredible courage. Remember that." Finally, the wooden doors opened, and a stream of people exited, some looking relieved, others disappointed. A stern-looking woman in judicial robes appeared in the doorway, scanning the hallway until her eyes landed on Gabriel. For a moment, her professional demeanor cracked, revealing genuine surprise and something like affection. "Gabriel Thorne," she said, approaching them. "It's been years." Gabriel stood, offering a respectful nod. "Hello, Martha. Thank you for seeing us." Judge Sullivan's gaze shifted to Olivia, assessing but not unkind. "And who might this be?" "My name is Olivia Taylor," Olivia said, finding her voice. "And I need your help." The judge studied her for a moment, then nodded decisively. "Come into my chambers, both of you." Judge Sullivan's office was less intimidating than the courtroom, filled with books, photographs, and a large window overlooking a small garden. She gestured for them to sit while she took her place behind a massive desk. "Now," she said, removing her reading glasses, "tell me everything." And Olivia did. She spoke of the accident that took her parents, the series of foster homes, Mr. Peterson's wandering hands and locked doors, Ms. Winters' dismissal of her concerns, her escape into Blackwood Forest, and finding Gabriel instead of the monster she'd been taught to fear. Throughout her story, Judge Sullivan listened intently, occasionally making notes, but never interrupting. When Olivia finally fell silent, the judge turned to Gabriel. "And you brought her here instead of returning." "Her to the system," she observed, her tone neutral. "I brought her to someone I trust," Gabriel replied. "Someone who would ensure her safety and well-being, even if that means returning her to the system." Judge Sullivan nodded thoughtfully, then rose and moved to a filing cabinet. She extracted a folder and returned to her desk, flipping through its contents. "Olivia Taylor," she read. "Currently under the guardianship of the state. Assigned to social worker Diane Winters. Scheduled for placement at Westridge Group Home as of last night." She looked up. "You're officially listed as a runaway." Ms. Winters filed the report at 8:42 p.m. Olivia's heart sank. It was official then. She was in trouble. The judge continued reviewing the file. 3 foster placements in 3 months. The last with. Her eyes narrowed. Robert and Linda Peterson. Something in her tone made Olivia look up. The judge was frowning deeply at the file. "This isn't the first complaint against Mr. Peterson," Judge Sullivan said, almost to herself. "Not by a long shot." She pressed a button on her phone. "Sandra, get me everything we have on Robert Peterson. And call Detective Reynolds. I want him in my office in 30 minutes. Hope flickered in Olivia's chest. "You believe me?" Judge Sullivan's expression softened slightly. "Olivia, when multiple children make similar accusations independently, Patterns emerge. Mr. Peterson has been careful, selecting children without family advocates, children already labeled as troubled. But yes, I believe you. Tears of relief sprang to Olivia's eyes. Gabriel's hand found hers, offering silent support. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now," said Judge Sullivan, closing the file, "we ensure Olivia's immediate safety while we investigate her claims. And we revisit some previously dismissed complaints against Mr. Peterson." She focused on Olivia. "Unfortunately, I can't simply remove you from the system. There are legal procedures that must be followed. But I can ensure you're placed somewhere safe while we sort this out." "The warehouse," Olivia began fearfully, "is absolutely not an option," the judge interrupted firmly. "I've had concerns about that facility for years." She appeared to be thinking deeply, weighing options. Finally, she turned to Gabriel. "You still have your foster care license, I assume?" Gabriel looked startled. "It expired years ago after I lost Eleanor and Lily." "But you completed all the training, the home studies, everything required." "Yes, but my home is different now. It's remote, rustic, with running water, electricity, heat. Yes, but food, shelter, safety?" "Of course, but..." Judge Sullivan held up a hand to stop his protests. "Gabriel, I'm not suggesting anything permanent. But I need somewhere safe for Olivia while we investigate her claims and find an appropriate, long-term placement. Somewhere away from local influences where certain people can't reach her." Understanding dawned on Gabriel's face. "A temporary emergency placement." "Exactly. It would require renewing your license, expedited of course, and regular check-ins with a court-appointed guardian ad litem. But it would keep Olivia safe and give us time to properly address the Peterson situation." Gabriel looked at Olivia, a question in his eyes. Would she be comfortable staying with him, a man she'd just met, living in his remote cabin far from town? Olivia didn't hesitate. "I want to stay with Gabriel," she said firmly. "And Daisy, Shadow, and Peanut." Judge Sullivan's eyebrows rose slightly at the mention of Puppies, but she nodded. "Then let's make it happen. It will take a few days to process the emergency placement. In the meantime, Olivia will need to stay at a temporary facility. Can't she just stay with me until the paperwork goes through?" Gabriel asked. "The cabin is perfectly safe, and Frank can vouch for my character." The judge hesitated, clearly torn between protocol and practicality. "Technically no, but..." She sighed. "Given the circumstances and the immediate safety concerns, I'll authorize a provisional emergency placement, effective immediately, pending the formal approval. But Gabriel, everything must be by the book from here on out. The slightest irregularity could jeopardize everything." "I understand," Gabriel said solemnly. Judge Sullivan turned to her computer and began typing rapidly. "I'll issue the provisional order now and expedite the formal process. Detective Reynolds will want to speak with both of you about the Peterson situation. Are you prepared for that, Olivia?" Olivia swallowed hard but nodded. "Yes, I want to make sure he can't hurt anyone else." For the first time, Judge Sullivan smiled, a small but genuine expression that transformed her stern face. "Good girl. Your courage may help protect other children." The next few hours passed in a blur of statements, paperwork, and meetings. Detective Reynolds, a kind-eyed man with a notebook always in hand, listened carefully to Olivia's account, asking clarifying questions but never doubting her story. By late afternoon, the provisional placement had been authorized. Detective Reynolds had opened an official investigation into Robert Peterson, and Judge Sullivan had arranged for a court-appointed advocate to visit Gabriel's cabin within the week. As they prepared to leave, the judge pulled Gabriel aside for a private word. Olivia couldn't hear what was said, but she saw Gabriel's solemn nod and the way Judge Sullivan squeezed his arm in a gesture of support. "Ready to go home?" Gabriel asked when he rejoined. Olivia, Home. The word felt strange and wonderful after months of temporary places and uncertainty. Yes, Olivia said, surprising herself with how right it felt. I'm ready to go home. As Frank's truck carried them back toward Blackwood Forest and the mountain cabin that would be her sanctuary for the foreseeable future, Olivia found herself thinking about the stories of the mountain man, how wrong they had been, how easily fear had transformed a grieving father into a monster. But she also thought about the puppies waiting for them, about the strays Gabriel fed each dawn, about the judge who had believed her when others wouldn't. Perhaps there was more kindness in the world than she had dared to hope. Gabriel gazed out the window, his expression thoughtful. Are you sure you're all right with this arrangement? Living in a remote cabin with a stranger might not be what you imagined for yourself. Olivia considered his question seriously. You're not a stranger anymore, she said finally. And after everything that's happened, a quiet cabin in the woods sounds pretty perfect. Gabriel smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes and erased years from his face. Then welcome home, Olivia Taylor. For as long as you need it, my cabin is your kingdom. As the truck wound its way toward the mountain, Olivia felt something she hadn't experienced since the day police officers appeared at her classroom door. Hope. Not just for tomorrow or next week, but for a future that might contain happiness. Again, the stories had been wrong about the mountain man. Perhaps they were wrong about other things too. Perhaps she wasn't destined to be just another lost child in the system. Perhaps she could find her way to something better, something that felt like family again. And as Blackwood Forest appeared on the horizon, no longer forbidden but welcoming, Olivia knew one thing with absolute certainty. Sometimes salvation comes from the very places we're taught to fear the most. Life in Gabriel Thorne's mountain cabin quickly settled into a rhythm that brought Olivia more peace than she had known since losing her parents. Each morning, she woke to the sounds of Gabriel moving quietly around the kitchen, preparing breakfast before their dawn trek to feed the forest strays. At first, the dogs had been wary of her, keeping their distance with suspicious eyes. But by the end of her first week, several would approach for gentle pats, their tails wagging in tentative friendship. They're just like people, Gabriel explained, as they watched a particularly skittish hound finally accept food from Olivia's hand. They've been hurt, abandoned. Trust comes slowly, but when it comes, it's a precious gift. Olivia thought about her own growing trust in Gabriel, how quickly she had come to feel safe in his presence despite the years of warnings about the monstrous mountain man. There was a lesson there, she decided, about judging people based on rumors rather than actions. The court-appointed advocate, Ms. Reynolds, Detective Reynolds' sister, as it happened, visited twice that first week. She was a no-nonsense woman with kind eyes who inspected the cabin thoroughly, interviewed Olivia privately, and took copious notes about everything from the food in the pantry to Gabriel's plans for Olivia's education. The cabin meets all basic requirements, she announced after her inspection. Clean, warm, well-maintained. The remote location presents challenges for schooling, but not insurmountable ones. Gabriel had already thought about that. I've arranged internet service installation next week, he told Ms. Reynolds. There are online programs for Olivia's grade level, and I have a laptop she can use. I was a teacher before I became a furniture maker. I can supplement her studies. This revelation surprised Olivia. In their conversations, Gabriel had mentioned his woodworking business, but never his previous career. You were a teacher? She asked after Ms. Reynolds had departed. Gabriel nodded, a distant look in his eyes. High school English and woodshop for almost 10 years. I loved it. Opening young minds to literature, teaching hands-on skills that built confidence. After the fire, after the rumors started, it became impossible to continue. The parents wouldn't want their children taught by the mountain man, Olivia guessed. Exactly. Even those who didn't believe the worst stories were uncomfortable. I resigned before they could fire me. He smiled sadly. "I still miss it sometimes." "You could teach me," Olivia suggested, sudden inspiration striking. "Not just regular school stuff, but woodworking too. I've seen your carvings. They're beautiful." Gabriel's expression brightened. "You'd want to learn?" "Absolutely." Olivia had been fascinated by the intricately carved animals and figures that decorated the cabin. "My dad tried to teach me whittling once, but I wasn't very good." "Everyone starts somewhere," Gabriel said, his enthusiasm growing. "We could set up a small workbench for you, begin with simple projects." That evening, they sketched plans for Olivia's education. Regular studies in the morning, math, science, language arts, history, followed by afternoons of practical skills, woodworking, gardening, identifying edible plants, tracking animals, even basic wilderness survival. "It's not a conventional education," Gabriel acknowledged. "Good," Olivia replied firmly. "Conventional hasn't worked out so well for me anyway." As October gave way to November, Olivia's days filled with learning. Gabriel proved to be an exceptional teacher, patient and encouraging, adept at explaining complex concepts in ways that made them understandable. Under his guidance, Olivia's mind flourished, absorbing knowledge with a hunger she hadn't felt in the sterile classrooms of her previous schools. In the workshop Gabriel had built behind the cabin, she learned to use tools with growing confidence, first simple sandpaper and files, then careful handling of knives and chisels. Her first completed project was a small lopsided wooden box that Gabriel praised as if it were fine art. "The proportions are excellent," he insisted, turning it over in his hands. "And look at how smoothly you finished the edges." "It's crooked," Olivia pointed out, but she couldn't hide her pride when Gabriel placed it on the mantel, in a position of honor beside his own more sophisticated pieces. November brought the first snow, transforming Blackwood Forest into a winter wonderland. The puppies, now twice the size they'd been when Olivia arrived, experienced snow for the first time, bounding through drifts and snapping at falling flakes with comical enthusiasm. Watching them, Olivia laughed until her sides hurt, a sound she had almost forgotten she could make. Gabriel taught her to identify animal tracks in the fresh snow, to recognize the subtle differences between rabbit and squirrel, fox and raccoon. They followed deer trails through the silent forest, moving quietly enough that once they came upon a magnificent buck drinking from a half-frozen stream, its breath clouding in the cold air. "Be still," Gabriel whispered as Olivia froze in wonder. "Watch, but don't disturb. We're guests in their home." The buck raised its head, dark eyes finding them, but sensing no threat, it calmly returned to drinking. It was a moment of pure magic that Olivia knew she would remember forever. Back at the cabin, evenings were spent reading by the fire, playing chess, or simply talking. Gabriel had a gift for storytelling, bringing to life the classics of literature, with voices and gestures that made Olivia feel as if she were inside the stories themselves. Sometimes he spoke of Eleanor and Lily, sharing memories that made them feel real to Olivia. Eleanor's terrible cooking but beautiful singing voice, Lily's collection of unusual rocks, and her tendency to bring home injured creatures that needed care. In turn, Olivia shared memories of her own parents, her mother's passion for teaching music, her father's terrible jokes but wonderful hugs. Speaking of them hurt less here, in this peaceful place with someone who truly understood loss. "Does it ever stop hurting?" she asked one evening, watching the fire dance in the hearth. Gabriel considered this carefully. "Not entirely," he admitted, "but it changes. The sharp pain becomes a gentle ache, and eventually you find you can remember the joy without being overwhelmed by the loss. The memories become treasures rather than torments." December arrived with deeper snow and holiday preparations. Together, they cut a small pine tree from the forest and decorated it with wooden ornaments Gabriel had carved over the years. Olivia spent secret hours in the workshop, crafting a gift for the man who had given her sanctuary when she needed it most. A carved figure of a man surrounded by dogs and puppies, rough but recognizable as Gabriel, Ms. Reynolds continued. Her regular visits, always bringing news from Judge Sullivan about the investigation into the Peterson situation. Progress was slow but promising. 2 other former foster children had come forward with similar accusations, and evidence was mounting. The judge is building a solid case, Ms. Reynolds assured them. These things take time, but she's determined to see justice done. She also brought word from the outside world that was less welcome. People in Maplewood were talking about Olivia's disappearance, and some were connecting it to the mountain man legends. There are rumors, Ms. Reynolds said carefully during her mid-December visit, that Gabriel abducted you. Olivia was outraged. That's ridiculous. He saved me. We know that, Ms. Reynolds soothed, but the people in town don't. They only know a troubled foster child disappeared near Blackwood Forest, and you haven't been seen since. Can't Judge Sullivan tell them the truth? Olivia demanded. The details of your case are confidential to protect you, Ms. Reynolds explained. The judge can't publicly discuss your whereabouts or situation. Gabriel, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. What do they plan to do about these rumors? Ms. Reynolds sighed. For now, nothing. You're legally Olivia's emergency guardian. All the paperwork is in order, and she's clearly thriving here. But she hesitated. But what? Olivia pressed. There's been talk in town about organizing a search party for you. Some parents are worried that if one child disappeared into the forest, others might too. Gabriel's face darkened with concern. If people start combing through these woods, they'll eventually find the cabin. Exactly, Ms. Reynolds agreed. And while you've done nothing wrong, perceptions can be powerful. If an angry group of townspeople show up here. She left the implication hanging. Olivia felt a cold fear that had nothing to do with the December chill. She remembered the stories about the mountain man, how deeply they were embedded in Maplewood's consciousness. A mob fueled by those stories could be dangerous, especially if they believed Gabriel had harmed her. What can we do? She asked. For now, be extra vigilant, Ms. Reynolds advised. Judge Sullivan is working on a more permanent solution for Olivia's placement, one that would make all this public and clear your name, Gabriel. But until then, keep a low profile. After Ms. Reynolds left, Gabriel was quieter than usual. His expression troubled as he worked on a carving. Olivia watched him, anxiety building in her chest. They won't take me away from here, will they? She finally asked, voicing her deepest fear. Gabriel set down his tools and looked at her directly. I won't let that happen, Olivia. Not unless it's truly what's best for you. This is what's best for me, she insisted. I'm happy here. I'm learning. I'm safe. Gabriel smiled, though worry still lingered in his eyes. Then we'll find a way to make it work. But the universe had other plans. 2 days before Christmas, a storm swept through Blackwood Forest, bringing heavy snow and howling winds that made their morning trek to feed the strays impossible. Gabriel insisted they wait until the worst had passed, building up the fire and preparing hot chocolate as the cabin creaked and groaned under the storm's assault. By mid-afternoon, the blizzard had weakened enough that Gabriel deemed it safe to check on the forest dogs. They bundled up in their warmest clothes and set out, wading through snow that reached Olivia's knees in places. The usual feeding spot was nearly unrecognizable, transformed by drifts that had reshaped the landscape. Only a few of the hardier dogs appeared when Gabriel whistled, emerging from whatever shelters they'd found during the storm. The others must be waiting it out, Gabriel said, frowning with concern. Let's leave extra food in case they come later. They were nearly finished when Olivia heard it. A faint whimpering carried on the wind, almost inaudible but unmistakably distressed. Gabriel, she said, grabbing his arm. Listen. They stood perfectly still, straining to hear over the lingering wind. The sound came again, a high, frightened cry that raised goosebumps on Olivia's arms. "This way," Gabriel said, already moving toward the sound, breaking trail through deep snow. They followed the cries to a ravine about a quarter-mile from the feeding area. Peering over the edge, Olivia gasped. Below, huddled against the ravine wall, was a child, a small boy no more than 7 or 8, his bright red coat stark against the white snow. He looked up at them with tear-stained cheeks, his face pale with cold and fear. "Help," he called weakly. "I can't climb up." Gabriel immediately began assessing the situation. The ravine wasn't extremely deep, perhaps 15 feet, but its sides were steep and slippery with snow and ice. The boy appeared unhurt, but was clearly exhausted and frightened. "We're going to get you out," Gabriel called down reassuringly. "What's your name?" "Ethan," the boy replied, his voice quavering. "Ethan Miller." Olivia recognized the name immediately. "Miller? Are you Sheriff Miller's son?" The boy nodded miserably. "We were looking for the lost girl. Dad told me to stay with the group, but I saw a fox and followed it, and then I couldn't find anyone, and I fell down here." His explanation tumbled out in one breath, punctuated by shivers. Gabriel and Olivia exchanged alarmed looks. The search parties Ms. Reynolds had warned about had already begun, and ironically, one of the searchers had now become lost as well. "I'm going down to him," Gabriel decided, already removing a coil of rope from his pack. He never ventured into the forest without emergency supplies. "Olivia, I need you to secure this around that tree. Remember the knots I showed you?" Olivia nodded, taking the rope with steady hands. Her fear was still there, but it was overpowered by the urgent need to help the child below. She looped the rope around the sturdy pine Gabriel had indicated, creating the secure anchor knot he had taught her during their wilderness lessons. Gabriel tested the rope, then carefully began his descent into the ravine, moving sideways in controlled steps. When he reached Ethan, he crouched to the boy's level, speaking softly and checking for injuries. "He seems okay," Gabriel called up to Olivia. "Cold and scared, but nothing broken. I'm going to secure him to me for the climb up." Using additional rope from his pack, Gabriel created a simple harness around Ethan's chest and tied the boy to himself. "Hold tight to me," he instructed. "Like a koala bear on a tree. Can you do that?" Ethan nodded bravely, wrapping his arms and legs around Gabriel as instructed. The climb up was slow and careful, Gabriel testing each handhold and foothold before committing his weight. Olivia held her breath until they finally reached the top, helping to pull Ethan over the edge to safety. The boy was shivering violently now, the adrenaline wearing off and the cold seeping deeper. Gabriel immediately removed his own outer coat and wrapped it around Ethan, then lifted the child into his arms. "We need to get him warm," he told Olivia. "The cabin is closest." They moved as quickly as possible through the snow-laden forest, Gabriel carrying Ethan while Olivia broke trail ahead. By the time they reached the cabin, the brief winter daylight was already fading, and Ethan's shivering had intensified despite the extra coat. Inside, Gabriel went into efficient emergency mode. "Get him out of those wet clothes," he instructed Olivia as he built up the fire. "Wrap him in blankets, the thermal ones from the emergency kit. I'll make hot tea with honey." Working together, they soon had Ethan dry, warm, and sipping sweet tea by the fire. Color gradually returned to his pale cheeks as the puppies, curious about their new visitor, crowded around, offering their own brand of comfort. Ethan's initial fear gave way to wonder as Peanut, still the smallest but now the boldest, climbed into his lap. "These are your dogs?" he asked, his voice steadier now. "These 3 are," Gabriel replied, hanging Ethan's wet clothes near the fire to dry. "The mother was a stray who died after giving birth. We've been raising them." "We?" Ethan looked confused, then his eyes widened as he really looked at Olivia for the first time. Wait, are you the missing girl? Olivia? Olivia nodded suddenly. Apprehensive, would he be afraid of her? Of Gabriel? Would he believe the mountain man's stories? But Ethan just looked puzzled. Why did you run away? Everyone's looking for you. My dad has search parties all over the forest. Before Olivia could formulate a response, Gabriel intervened gently. Ethan, how did you get separated from your father's search party? The distraction worked. Ethan launched into a more detailed explanation of following a fox, losing sight of the other searchers, attempting to find his way back, and ultimately falling into the ravine when the edge collapsed under his weight. I called and called, but nobody heard me, he concluded. I was there for hours before you found me. You were very brave, Gabriel told him, offering more tea. And smart to stay in one place rather than trying to climb out yourself. Dad taught me that, Ethan said proudly. If you're lost, stay put, make noise, wait for help. His expression fell. But Dad's probably really worried now. Gabriel nodded gravely. He is, and we need to get you back to him. But it's nearly dark, and the temperature is dropping fast. It wouldn't be safe to try navigating the forest at night, especially with more snow predicted. We can't go back tonight? Ethan looked crestfallen. I'm afraid not, Gabriel said gently. But first thing tomorrow, we'll take you home. In the meantime, we should try to get a message to your father so he knows you're safe. Gabriel retrieved a battery-powered emergency radio from a cabinet, one of many precautions he kept for forest emergencies. After some static and adjustment, he managed to reach the Maplewood Sheriff Station. This is Gabriel Thorne, he said clearly into the radio. I'm calling regarding Ethan Miller. He's safe and unhurt. There was a moment of crackling silence, then an urgent voice responded. This is Deputy Wilson. Where is Ethan? Where are you? Ethan got separated from the search party and fell into a ravine. My ward and I found him while checking on animals after the storm. He's at my cabin now, dry, warm, and uninjured. The weather makes it impossible to bring him down tonight, but we'll start at first light tomorrow. Your ward? The deputy sounded confused. Who are you with? Gabriel hesitated, looking at Olivia. She nodded encouragingly. Olivia Taylor is with me, Gabriel said. She's been legally placed in my emergency care by Judge Sullivan of Riverside County. The radio erupted with questions, but Gabriel calmly explained the situation. How Olivia had fled to escape placement at the warehouse. How Judge Sullivan had arranged the emergency guardianship. How all the proper legal procedures had been followed. I'll need to speak directly to Sheriff Miller, Gabriel said finally. And Ethan would like to talk to his father. After several minutes of radio exchanges, Sheriff Miller's voice came through, tight with emotion. Ethan? Son, are you there? Gabriel handed the radio to the boy, who clutched it with both hands. Dad, I'm okay. I got lost and fell in a hole, but Mr. Thorne rescued me, and they have puppies here, and I'm warm now. The relief in Sheriff Miller's voice was palpable as he spoke with his son, asking careful questions about his condition and treatment. Finally, he asked to speak to Gabriel again. Mr. Thorne, the sheriff said, his tone now professional but less hostile. I appreciate you rescuing my son. But you understand this situation raises many questions. Olivia Taylor has been missing for 2 months, and suddenly she's with you? I understand your concerns, Gabriel replied calmly. I've provided the case number from Judge Sullivan's court. You can verify everything I've told you. Olivia is here legally and by choice. There was a pause then. I'll be checking your story, Mr. Thorne, and I'll be at your cabin at first light tomorrow with a team. We'll be expecting you, Gabriel said. The trail from the North Ridge is clearest after heavy snow. After signing off, Gabriel slumped slightly, the tension of the conversation taking its toll. Olivia moved to his side, anxiety twisting her stomach. What's going to happen now? She asked quietly. Gabriel squeezed her shoulder reassuringly. "The truth will come out, Olivia. It's time." As night fell over Blackwood Forest, Ethan's initial wariness of the mountain man had completely disappeared. He chattered excitedly about the puppies, asked dozens of questions about living in the woods, and eagerly accepted Gabriel's offer of homemade stew for dinner. Olivia watched their interaction with growing unease. Tomorrow, everything would change. People from town would come to the cabin, not just Sheriff Miller, but others too. They would see Gabriel as he truly was, not as the monster of their imaginations. But would that be enough to change minds shaped by years of fearful stories? And what would happen to her? Would Judge Sullivan's authority hold against the pressure of local opinion? Would she be sent back to the warehouse after all? After Ethan was tucked into Olivia's bed, she would sleep on the couch. Gabriel found her sitting by the fire, lost in worried thoughts. "It was always going to happen eventually," he said, settling beside her. "The truth finding its way out." "I'm scared," Olivia admitted. "Not for me, but for you. What if they don't believe us? What if they still think you're dangerous?" Gabriel smiled sadly. "I've lived with their fear for 8 years, Olivia. I've made peace with it. What matters now is ensuring your future." "But what about your future?" Olivia pressed. "Don't. You want people to know the truth about you. Don't you want to be able to go into town without everyone staring and whispering?" Gabriel was quiet for a long moment, gazing into the fire. "There was a time when that mattered to me," he said finally. "When I raged against the injustice of it all, demanded to be seen as I truly was. But over time, I realized something important. The opinion of others is far less valuable than my own knowledge of who I am." He turned to face her directly. "I know I'm not the monster they've made me out to be. I know I loved my wife and daughter with all my heart. I know I've done my best to live with integrity, despite the pain and loss. That knowledge sustains me, even when others see only what their fear tells them to see." Olivia considered his words, finding wisdom but also a resignation that troubled her. "But doesn't the truth matter? Don't you get tired of living with their lies?" "The truth always matters," Gabriel agreed. "But sometimes it takes time to emerge. And yes, I get tired. But I've found purpose in my solitude, my woodworking, caring for the forest strays, and now helping you." He smiled then, a genuine expression that warmed his eyes. "Whatever happens tomorrow, Olivia, know this: having you here has been a gift. You've brought life and laughter back to this cabin. You've reminded me what it means to teach, to guide, to care for someone. No matter what the town decides about me, that gift remains." Olivia felt tears prick her eyes. "I don't want to leave," she whispered. Gabriel gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I know, but whatever happens, we'll face it together. Get some rest now. Tomorrow will be a challenging day." As Olivia settled onto the couch, listening to the puppy's soft breathing and the crackling fire, she made a silent promise to herself and to Gabriel. Tomorrow, the people of Maplewood would learn the truth about the mountain man, not just from words but from actions. They would see the man who had saved a child from a freezing ravine, who fed stray dogs at dawn every morning, who had given a lost girl a home when she had nowhere else to go. And if they still couldn't see the truth, if they clung to their fearful stories despite the evidence before them, then they didn't deserve to know the real Gabriel Thorne. But Olivia knew him, and that knowledge gave her the courage to face whatever morning would bring. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and silent, covering the forest in a fresh blanket of white. Inside the cabin, 3 souls found rest. A boy rescued from danger, a man maligned by rumors, and a girl determined to protect the truth. Whatever storms tomorrow might bring, for tonight they were safe, warm, and together. Dawn broke over Blackwood Forest with golden light spilling through the trees, transforming the snow-covered landscape into a glittering wonderland. Inside Gabriel's cabin, Olivia woke to the sounds of quiet conversation and the delicious aroma of breakfast cooking. For a moment, she was disoriented, her mind struggling to process the events of the previous day. Finding Ethan. The radio call to Sheriff Miller, the knowledge that today everything would change. Wrapping a blanket around her shoulders, she padded to the kitchen where Gabriel was showing Ethan how to flip pancakes without splattering batter. The boy, fully recovered from his ordeal in the ravine, was standing on a stool beside Gabriel, his face a picture of concentration as he carefully turned a perfectly golden pancake. "I did it!" he exclaimed proudly. "Perfect technique," Gabriel praised, his smile warm but tinged with tension that only Olivia could detect. "You're a natural." Noticing Olivia, Ethan waved enthusiastically. "Morning. Mr. Thorne's teaching me to make pancakes. We made extra for you." Olivia managed a smile despite the knot of anxiety in her stomach. They looked delicious. As they ate breakfast, Ethan chattered excitedly about the puppies, his adventures in the forest, and how his father would be arriving soon. His innocent excitement stood in stark contrast to the apprehension Olivia felt, knowing what the day might bring. "Ethan," Gabriel said gently when they'd finished eating, "your clothes are dry now. Why don't you get dressed while Olivia and I clean up? Your father will be here soon." Once Ethan had disappeared into the bathroom with his now dry clothes, Gabriel turned to Olivia, his expression grave. "Are you ready for this?" Olivia wanted to say yes, to show the same courage Gabriel had demonstrated for years living under the weight of unfair rumors, but honesty prevailed. "I'm scared," she admitted. "What if they don't listen? What if they take me away?" Gabriel's weathered hand covered hers briefly. "Whatever happens, remember this: the truth has power. It may not work quickly or easily, but in time, truth finds its way into the light." Before Olivia could respond, Ethan burst back into the room, fully dressed and bubbling with excitement. "Can we look for my dad from the porch? Maybe we can see them coming." Gabriel checked his watch, an old practical timepiece that had clearly seen years of use. "They should be arriving soon. Let's get you bundled up." The three of them stepped onto the cabin's front porch, the morning air crisp and cold against their faces. The forest stretched before them, silent and beautiful in its winter dress. Ethan, bouncing with impatience, scanned the trees for any sign of his father's search party. They didn't have to wait long. Within minutes, they heard the distant crunch of snow under boots and voices calling to each other as they navigated the forest trail. Ethan's face lit up with recognition. "Dad!" he shouted, waving his arms wildly. "Dad, I'm here!" A moment later, a group of men emerged from the tree line, 6 figures dressed in heavy winter gear, led by a tall man whose pace quickened at the sound of his son's voice. "Ethan!" Sheriff Miller broke into a run, covering the distance to the cabin in seconds and sweeping his son into a fierce embrace. "Thank God you're safe." Olivia watched the reunion with a lump in her throat, remembering similar hugs from her own father, the feeling of absolute safety in his arms, the unshakable certainty that he would protect her from anything. Memory brought both comfort and renewed grief. Sheriff Miller held his son at arm's length, checking him over with anxious eyes. "Are you hurt? What happened?" Ethan launched into an enthusiastic recounting of his adventure, following the fox, falling into the ravine, being rescued by Gabriel and Olivia, spending the night with Puppies. His story tumbled out in excited fragments, painting a picture very different from the fearsome mountain man of town legend. As Ethan spoke, Sheriff Miller's gaze moved between Gabriel and Olivia, his expression a complex mixture of gratitude, confusion, and lingering suspicion. The other men, deputies and volunteers from town, hung back, their faces openly displaying their unease at finding themselves at the notorious mountain man's cabin. When Ethan finished his tale, Sheriff Miller straightened, his hand remaining protectively on his son's shoulder. "Mr. Thorne," he said formally, "I owe you my thanks for rescuing my boy." Gabriel nodded acknowledgement, Anyone would have done the same. Perhaps, the sheriff replied, his tone making it clear he wasn't entirely convinced. His attention shifted to Olivia. And you must be Olivia Taylor. Olivia stood straighter, determined to face whatever came next with courage. Yes, sir. You've been missing for 2 months. The whole town's been worried. I wasn't missing, Olivia said firmly. I was safe here with Gabriel. One of the deputies made a skeptical noise, quickly silenced by a sharp look from the sheriff. I verified the information Mr. Thorne provided last night, Sheriff Miller said. Judge Sullivan confirmed that she authorized an emergency placement, and that all the proper paperwork is in order. Relief flooded through Olivia. The judge had backed them up, just as Gabriel had said she would. However, the sheriff continued, the situation remains unusual. I'll need both of you to come into town to make formal statements. And I'll need to conduct a thorough inspection of these premises. Gabriel nodded, his expression carefully neutral. Of course, we have nothing to hide. Dad. Ethan tugged at his father's sleeve. Can I show you the puppies before we go? They're so cute. A flicker of alarm crossed the sheriff's face, but Ethan was already pulling him toward the cabin door. They're inside by the fire. The little one is named Peanut, and he slept on my bed all night. The deputies exchanged uneasy glances as their sheriff was dragged into the mountain man's lair by his enthusiastic son. After a moment's hesitation, they followed, hands hovering near their sidearms despite Gabriel's unthreatening demeanor. Inside, the cabin's warm, inviting atmosphere seemed to take the men by surprise. Instead of the grotesque dwelling their imaginations had conjured, they found a space filled with beautiful craftsmanship, books, and the unmistakable signs of a home well tended. And there on the hearthrug were the puppies, tumbling over each other in play, utterly unconcerned by the visitors. Ethan immediately dropped to his knees beside them, beckoning his father closer. See? This is Peanut, and that's Shadow, and the one with the white paw is Daisy. Their mom died, but Mr. Thorne saved them. And he feeds lots of other dogs in the forest every morning. I helped yesterday. Sheriff Miller looked from the puppies to Gabriel, confusion evident in his expression. This gentle man caring for orphan puppies didn't match the monster of town legend who lured children with animals only to devour them. You feed stray dogs? One of the deputies asked, breaking the awkward silence. Gabriel nodded. Every morning. At dawn, there are about a dozen regulars who've become fairly tame, plus others who come and go with the seasons. Is that why you're often seen in the forest early in the morning? The sheriff asked, understanding beginning to dawn in his eyes. Yes, Gabriel replied simply. I suppose from a distance, a man walking with several dogs might look suspicious, especially if you've already decided he's dangerous. The implication hung in the air, how easily observation became rumor and rumor became assumed fact. Several of the men shifted uncomfortably, avoiding Gabriel's gaze. Sheriff Miller cleared his throat. We should head back to town. It's a long walk and more snow is predicted for this afternoon. The journey down the mountain was slow and considerably less tense than Olivia had feared. Ethan, walking between his father and Gabriel, kept up a steady stream of questions about the forest, the animals, and Gabriel's woodworking. His natural curiosity and obvious comfort with the man they'd been taught to fear gradually affected the other men, softening their wariness with each step. Olivia walked beside one of the younger deputies, a man named Officer Collins, who couldn't be much older than 20. Unlike the others, he seemed more curious than fearful. So you've been living up there all this time? He asked quietly. Weren't you scared? Olivia considered her answer carefully. At first, maybe a little. The stories about the mountain men are pretty scary. But Gabriel isn't anything like the stories. He's kind and patient and makes amazing pancakes. Officer Collins glanced ahead at Gabriel, who was pointing out animal tracks in the snow to an enthralled Ethan. Hard to match that guy with the stories, I'll admit, he murmured. Makes you wonder how they got started in the first place. People fear what they don't understand, Olivia quoted Gabriel's words. And sometimes they prefer a convenient monster to the truth. The young deputy nodded thoughtfully, his gaze lingering on Gabriel's gentle interaction with Ethan. As they neared Maplewood, Olivia's anxiety returned full force. What would the townspeople think when they saw her with Gabriel? Would they believe the truth, or cling to their comfortable myths? Would they try to separate them, send her back to the warehouse despite Judge Sullivan's orders? The first houses of Maplewood came into view, smoke curling from chimneys against the winter sky. People emerged from their homes at the sight of the returning search party, relief turning to confusion and then suspicion as they recognized Gabriel walking among them. Whispers spread rapidly, parents pulling children closer, eyes narrowing with distrust. Olivia felt her chest tighten with each hostile glance, each hushed accusation. She moved closer to Gabriel, whose face had settled into a calm mask that betrayed none of the hurt he must be feeling. Then something unexpected happened. Ethan, noticing the growing tension, took Gabriel's hand in his own small one and continued walking as if nothing were amiss. The simple gesture, a child's hand trustingly held by the man the town called monster, created a powerful image that stopped the whispers in their tracks. Sheriff Miller, observing this, made a decision. Instead of leading them directly to the sheriff's station as planned, he guided the group to the town square where more people could see them. More importantly, where more people could see Ethan's obvious comfort with Gabriel, could witness the disconnect between the fearsome mountain man of legend and the quiet, dignified man before them. "Folks," Sheriff Miller called out, his voice carrying across the square, "as you can see, Ethan has been found safe and sound. I'd like to thank everyone who volunteered for the search parties." The gathered townspeople clapped politely, though their eyes remained fixed on Gabriel and Olivia. "I'd also like to recognize the person responsible for my son's rescue," the sheriff continued, his hand resting on Ethan's shoulder. Gabriel Thorne found Ethan in a ravine where he'd been trapped for hours, brought him to safety, and cared for him until we could arrive this morning. A murmur ran through the crowd, confusion, disbelief, the uncomfortable cognitive dissonance of having one's deepest fears challenged. "The mountain man saved him?" someone called out. "That's not possible. He's not the mountain man," Ethan announced with the absolute certainty only a child can muster. "He's Mr. Thorne, and he rescued me, and he takes care of puppies, and he makes the best pancakes ever." A ripple of nervous laughter ran through the crowd, but the tension had begun to ease. Ethan's innocent testimony carried a weight that no adult denial could have achieved. "I believe we all owe Mr. Thorne our gratitude," Sheriff Miller said, "and perhaps an apology for certain misconceptions that have circulated about him." It was as close to a public exoneration as Gabriel was likely to get, and Olivia could see from his face that it meant more to him than he would admit. For 8 years, he had lived under the weight of the town's fear and suspicion. To stand now in the town square and be acknowledged, not as a monster but as a rescuer, seemed to lift some of that burden from his shoulders. The crowd's response was mixed, some nodding in shamefaced acceptance, others still wary and unconvinced. But it was a beginning, a crack in the wall of fear that had isolated Gabriel for so long. At the sheriff's station, the formalities were handled with unexpected efficiency. Gabriel and Olivia gave their statements. Sheriff Miller contacted Judge Sullivan to confirm the legal arrangements, and by early afternoon, it was settled Olivia would remain in Gabriel's emergency custody until a more permanent arrangement could be determined. "Judge Sullivan speaks very highly of you, Mr. Thorne," Sheriff Miller said as they prepared to leave. "She mentioned you were once a teacher here in Maplewood." Gabriel nodded. "High school English and woodshop years ago." "We've been without a woodshop teacher since Mr. Peterson retired last spring," the sheriff said casually. "Funding cuts," they said, but really it was because we couldn't find anyone qualified. Shame too. Those practical skills are important for kids to learn. The implication hung in the air, neither man acknowledging it directly, but both understanding what was being offered: a way back into the community, a chance to reclaim part of the life Gabriel had lost. "Something to think about," Gabriel said noncommittally, but Olivia could see a spark in his eyes that hadn't been there before. As they left the station, a small crowd had gathered outside, not hostile as before, but curious. Among them was a woman in her 60s, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, her face lined with age but her eyes sharp and clear. "Gabriel Thorne," she said, stepping forward. "It's been a long time." Gabriel stiffened slightly, recognition and wariness crossing his face. "Mrs. Henderson, I always knew you couldn't have had anything to do with that fire," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Eleanor was my best friend, and she told me how happy you made her, how good you were with Lily." Her public declaration of faith seemed to stun Gabriel. "Thank you," he managed, his voice rough with emotion. "It's about time you came back to town," Mrs. Henderson continued firmly. "Hiding in those woods all these years, letting people tell their silly stories instead of showing them who you really are." Several people in the crowd nodded agreement, shamefaced but determined to make amends. "The winter festival is next weekend," Mrs. Henderson added. "The committee could use someone with your woodworking skills. The usual display pieces are looking rather tired after all these years." It was an olive branch, offered publicly and with dignity. Gabriel hesitated, decades of hurt and isolation making him cautious, but Olivia squeezed his hand encouragingly. "I'll consider it," he said finally. As they walked back toward the forest trail that would lead them home, Olivia could sense the change in Gabriel, a cautious hope beginning to bloom after years of resignation. "That went better than expected," she ventured. Gabriel nodded slowly. "One day doesn't erase 8 years of stories," he cautioned. "Change takes time." "But it's a start," Olivia insisted. "Mrs. Henderson believes in you. Sheriff Miller offered you a job, not directly, but that's what he was hinting at, wasn't it?" "Perhaps," Gabriel acknowledged. "But what matters most is what happens with you. Judge Sullivan will be looking for a permanent placement, possibly with a family who can adopt you." The thought sent a chill through Olivia, despite the winter sun on her face. "I don't want another family. I want to stay with you." Gabriel stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "Olivia, I care about you deeply, but I'm a single man living in a remote cabin. Any judge would prefer to place you with a traditional family, 2 parents, other children, in town where you can attend school and have friends your age." "But I'm happy with you," Olivia protested. "I'm learning more than I ever did in school. I have the puppies for company, and I'm not afraid all the time like I was in those foster homes." Gabriel's expression softened. "I know, and if it were up to me alone, you could stay forever. But these decisions aren't made based on what we want, but on what the court determines is in your best interest. Then we'll have to convince them that staying with you is in my best interest," Olivia said with determination. "We'll show them how well I'm doing, how much I'm learning. And if you take that teaching job, you'll be part of the community again. That has to count for something." Gabriel smiled at her tenacity. "We'll see. For now, let's go home. The puppies will be wondering where we are." Home. The word still felt like a miracle after months of temporary shelters and strangers' houses. As they climbed the forest trail toward the cabin, snow beginning to fall in gentle flakes around them, Olivia felt a sense of rightness that had been missing since her parents' death. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them with the same courage Gabriel had shown all these years, the courage to believe in truth, even when others couldn't see it. The following weeks brought changes Olivia could never have imagined. Gabriel, after much consideration, agreed to meet with the school board about the vacant woodshop position. His interview, supported by glowing recommendations from Judge Sullivan, and surprisingly, Sheriff Miller, resulted in an offer to teach 2 classes 3 days a week, a schedule that would allow him to maintain his furniture business and care. For Olivia, the winter festival proved to be another turning point. Gabriel's intricately carved snow scene, featuring woodland, animals in a forest clearing, won first prize and drew admiration from townspeople who had previously crossed the street to avoid him. Children, less burdened by years of rumors than their parents, gathered around as he demonstrated simple carving techniques, their natural curiosity overcoming lingering fears. Not everyone was quick to change their minds, of course. Some families still pulled their children closer when Gabriel approached. Some storekeepers still watched him with wary eyes. But the most vicious rumors began to fade, replaced by new stories: how Gabriel Thorne had rescued Sheriff Miller's son, how he fed stray dogs every morning, how the mountain man was actually just a quiet woodworker who preferred solitude. To gossip, through it all, Olivia remained at Gabriel's side, her presence a constant reminder that the man they had feared was someone a child trusted completely. Her obvious happiness and health spoke louder than any defense Gabriel could have offered for himself. Judge Sullivan visited their cabin regularly, observing Olivia's progress with her studies and her growing confidence. After one such visit, as she prepared to leave, she took Gabriel aside for a private conversation while Olivia played with the puppies. "You've done remarkable work with her," the judge said. "She's thriving here in a way she never did in her previous placements." "She's a remarkable girl," Gabriel replied. "Resilient, intelligent, kind-hearted. Any progress she's made is due to her own strength." Judge Sullivan smiled knowingly. "You underestimate your influence, Gabriel. But that's always been your way, giving credit to others while minimizing your own contributions." She paused, her expression growing more serious. "I've been reviewing Olivia's case. The emergency placement expires next month, and normally I would be looking for a permanent adoption arrangement." Gabriel nodded, his heart heavy despite having expected this. "Of course. She deserves a stable family. That's my conclusion." "As well," Judge Sullivan agreed. "Which is why I wanted to discuss with you the possibility of you adopting her yourself." Gabriel stared at her, certain he had misheard. "Me? But I'm single. I live remotely. You're employed by the school district. You own your home outright. You have no criminal record, and most importantly, you've provided Olivia with the first real stability and security she's known since losing her parents." Judge Sullivan interrupted. "Single-parent adoptions are less common, but certainly not unprecedented, especially in cases where a strong bond has already formed." Hope, tentative but growing, bloomed in Gabriel's chest. "You think it could be approved?" "I think it's worth pursuing if you're interested," the judge replied. "There would be home studies, interviews, considerable paperwork. And you should know that Robert Peterson has appealed the termination of his foster care license and is attempting to discredit Olivia's testimony." Gabriel's expression darkened at the mention of the man who had hurt Olivia and likely other children. "He won't succeed." "No," Judge Sullivan said firmly. "We have corroborating testimony now from 2 other former foster children. But his efforts might complicate Olivia's adoption process. These things are rarely smooth." "Nothing worthwhile ever is," Gabriel said, his resolve strengthening. "If Olivia wants this, if she wants me to be her legal guardian permanently, then I'll do whatever it takes to make it happen." Judge Sullivan smiled, looking suddenly less like a stern jurist and more like the friend she had once been. To Gabriel's wife, "I thought you might say that. I've taken the liberty of starting the preliminary paperwork. We can discuss details after you've spoken with Olivia." That evening, after Judge Sullivan had departed, Gabriel found Olivia sitting on the cabin porch, watching the sunset paint the snow-covered forest in shades of gold and pink. The puppies played in the yard, their playful yips punctuating the peaceful evening. "May I join you?" Gabriel asked. Olivia nodded, scooting over to make room on the wooden bench he had crafted years ago for Eleanor. They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, watching the day's light fade into gentle twilight. "Judge Sullivan mentioned that your emergency placement will be ending next month," Gabriel finally said. Olivia's face fell, her shoulders tensing. "Are they sending me away?" "That depends," Gabriel replied carefully, "on what you want." "I want to stay here with you," Olivia said immediately. "I thought I made that clear." "You did," Gabriel assured her. "And the judge has suggested a way that might be possible. Permanently." Olivia turned to him, hope and wariness battling in her expression. "How?" "Adoption," Gabriel said simply. "If you wanted, I could apply to adopt you legally. You would stay here with me as my daughter. Not just my ward or a temporary placement, but family." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes, spilling down her cheeks in silver tracks. "You'd want that? To adopt me?" "More than anything," Gabriel admitted, his own voice thick with emotion. "But only if it's what you truly want. It's a big decision, Olivia. You should take time to think about." His words were cut off as Olivia launched herself into his arms, hugging him fiercely. "Yes," she whispered against his shoulder. "Yes, please. I want to be your daughter." Gabriel held her close, his heart full to bursting with a joy he had never expected to feel again after losing Eleanor and Lily. This bright, brave girl had wandered into his life on a desperate October night, and somehow, against all odds, they had found in each other exactly what they both needed: family. The adoption process was not simple or quick. There were interviews, home studies, court appearances, and as Judge Sullivan had warned, obstacles created by Robert Peterson's vindictive appeals. But through it all, Gabriel and Olivia faced each challenge together, their determination never wavering. The town of Maplewood, in its own gradual way, became part of their support system. Mrs. Henderson organized a group of women to testify about Gabriel's character and his care of Olivia. Sheriff Miller spoke forcefully about Gabriel's rescue of Ethan and his subsequent positive influence in the community. Even Gabriel's students from his new woodshop classes wrote letters to the court, describing the patient, kind teacher who had nothing in common with the mythical mountain man they had been taught to fear. 6 months after that snowy morning, when they had walked into town together, Olivia and Gabriel stood before Judge Sullivan in her Riverside courtroom. The proceedings were brief, the outcome never really in doubt given the judge's support. When she officially declared Olivia Taylor to be legally Olivia Thorne, daughter of Gabriel Thorne, the small crowd of supporters from Maplewood erupted in applause. As they drove back to Blackwood Forest that evening, in Gabriel's rarely used truck rather than hiking the mountain trail, Olivia was uncharacteristically quiet, lost in thought as she watched the familiar landscape pass by. "Having second thoughts?" Gabriel asked gently, misreading her silence. Olivia shook her head emphatically. "Never. I was just thinking about how strange life is. If I hadn't run away that night, if I hadn't gone into the forest where everyone said a monster lived, I wouldn't have found you. All those stories meant to frighten children away from the woods actually led me exactly where I needed to go." Gabriel considered this as they turned onto the narrow road that would take them up the mountain to their home. "Perhaps there's a lesson there," he suggested, "about how the things we fear most sometimes turn out to be the things we need most. Or about how rumors and stories can hide the truth," Olivia added. "People were so busy making you into a monster that they couldn't see you were actually a hero." Gabriel laughed softly. "I'm no hero, Olivia. Just a man who's made plenty of mistakes, but who was fortunate enough to be given a second chance at family." As they reached the cabin, now expanded with a proper bedroom for Olivia and a larger workshop where they created furniture together. The dogs greeted them with enthusiastic barks, not just the puppies, now nearly full-grown, but several of the former strays who had gradually accepted Gabriel's invitation to become more permanent residents. Inside, the warm glow of home welcomed them. Books lining the shelves, Olivia's woodworking projects displayed proudly alongside Gabriel's more skilled pieces. Photographs of Eleanor and Lily, now joined by new images of Olivia and Gabriel's growing family of four-legged companions. "Do you think they'd be happy for us?" Olivia asked suddenly, nodding toward the photograph of Gabriel's first family. Eleanor and Lily? Gabriel's throat tightened with emotion as he considered the question. "Yes," he said finally. "Eleanor always believed in second chances, in the healing power of love. And Lily would have adored you. You have her spirit, her curiosity, her compassion for all living things." Olivia smiled, touching the photograph gently. "Then I'll try to live up to that, to honor the sister I never met, but somehow feel I know." That night, as peace settled over the cabin in Blackwood Forest, Gabriel reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From a grieving, isolated man hiding from the world's judgment to a father again, a teacher again, a member of a community again. All because a brave, desperate girl had ignored the warnings and seen through the monster stories to the truth beneath. The mountain man had never existed, had never been anything more than fear-given form, a convenient boogeyman for parents to use in controlling their children. But Gabriel Thorne was real, flawed, wounded, but capable of great kindness and profound love. And now, thanks to Olivia's courage and a town's gradual awakening, he was free to be fully himself again. Outside, snow began to fall, soft and silent, covering the forest in a fresh blanket of white. Inside, father and daughter prepared for sleep, secure in the knowledge that they had found in each other exactly what they both needed most: a home where they were truly seen, truly known, and truly loved. And as for the stories of the mountain man who ate children, they gradually transformed into new stories, tales of the gentle woodworker who rescued lost children, who fed stray dogs at dawn, who taught young hands to create beauty from raw wood. Because in the end, truth is always more powerful than fear, and love is always stronger than the darkness that tries to deny it. 5 years had passed since that snowy morning when Olivia and Gabriel had walked into Maplewood together, forever changing both their lives and the town's perception of the so-called mountain man. The seasons had cycled through their eternal dance, winters of crystalline beauty giving way to springs of rebirth, summers of abundant growth, and autumns of fiery splendor. Through it all, the bond between father and daughter had deepened into something as natural and enduring as the ancient forest surrounding their home. On this particular morning, Olivia stood at the edge of the cabin's expanded porch, watching the sunrise paint the mountain in shades of gold and amber. At 17, she had grown into a young woman of quiet confidence and remarkable skill. Her hands, once small and uncertain, now crafted woodwork that rivaled Gabriel's own, her innate artistic sense complementing the technical skills he had patiently taught her. "Today's the day," Gabriel said, joining her on the porch with steaming mugs of coffee. He handed one to Olivia, who accepted it with a grateful smile. "I know," she replied, her voice a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "I keep checking to make sure I have everything ready." Today marked a significant milestone: the opening of the Blackwood Forest Artisan Center in Maplewood, a project 5 years in the making. What had begun as Gabriel's modest return to teaching woodworking at the high school had evolved into something neither he nor Olivia could have imagined. The abandoned gristmill at the edge of town, once slated for demolition, had been transformed under their guidance into a community arts center where both established craftspeople and beginners could create, teach, and sell their work. The display pieces are all in place, Gabriel reassured her. Your collection is front and center, just as it should be. Olivia's Woodland Guardians, a series of intricately carved animal figures representing the forest's inhabitants, had already garnered attention from galleries in larger cities. But she had chosen to debut them here, in this community that had journeyed from fear to acceptance, from suspicion to support. I keep thinking about how different things are now, Olivia mused, sipping her coffee. Remember how people used to cross the street when they saw you coming? Gabriel chuckled, the sound warm in the morning air. And now they stop me to ask woodworking advice or commission pieces. Life has a way of surprising us. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. It had taken time, patience, and persistent courage from both Gabriel and Olivia. Each small step, Gabriel teaching at the school, Olivia excelling in her studies. Their quiet participation in community events had gradually eroded the myths that had once isolated them. The dogs, a now permanent pack of 7, including the original puppies Daisy, Shadow, and Peanut, lounged around the porch, enjoying the morning sun. They were well known in town now, accompanying Gabriel and Olivia on their trips to Maplewood, further dismantling the old rumors about children being lured with puppies. Now children asked permission to pet them, and the dogs had become unofficial mascots of Gabriel's woodworking classes. We should get ready, Gabriel said, glancing at his watch. Mrs. Henderson will be here at 9 to drive us down for the final preparations. Mrs. Henderson, Eleanor's former best friend, had become a fixture in their lives, a bridge between Gabriel's past and present. Her unwavering support had opened doors that might otherwise have remained closed, and her blunt, no-nonsense manner had silenced the few remaining voices of suspicion in town. As they prepared for the day ahead, Olivia found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. Not just the external changes, the expansion of the cabin, the growth of Gabriel's furniture business, his return to teaching, but the internal transformations that had reshaped both their lives. Gabriel was no longer the isolated hermit, hiding from a town's judgment, but a respected craftsman and teacher whose quiet wisdom had influenced countless students. The lines of grief that had once marked his face had softened, replaced by the laugh lines that came from genuine joy. He still honored the memory of Eleanor and Lily, but their photographs no longer represented unresolved pain. They were part of a larger family story that now included Olivia. And Olivia herself had journeyed from a frightened, grieving child to a young woman with purpose and confidence. The nightmares that had once plagued her, of being sent to the warehouse, of losing another family, had gradually faded. In their place came dreams of the future, of expanding her artistic horizons while maintaining the deep connection to this mountain, and the man who had saved her in every way that mattered. Mrs. Henderson arrived precisely at 9, her ancient station wagon chugging up the mountain road with determined persistence. At 71, she drove with the same no-nonsense efficiency that characterized everything she did, navigating the winding forest road with practiced ease. "There you are, right on time," she called, climbing out of the car with energy that belied her years. Her silver hair was styled in its usual practical bob, and her eyes sparkled with excitement. "Today's the big day. Are you nervous? You shouldn't be. Everything's going to be wonderful." Her enthusiasm was contagious, dispelling any lingering anxiety Olivia might have felt. They loaded the last few items, special tools for the demonstrations, Olivia's portfolio of designs, and a basket of Mrs. Henderson's legendary blackberry muffins, into the station wagon and set off down the mountain. The drive to town was filled with Mrs. Henderson's cheerful chatter about who would be attending the opening, which town council members had been most supportive and which had needed extra convincing, and how the high school students Gabriel taught had volunteered to help with the event. "Sheriff Miller will be giving a short speech," she informed them. His boy Ethan insisted on it. "That child has been your biggest champion, Gabriel. Well, apart from Olivia, of course." Ethan Miller, now 12, had never forgotten his rescue from the ravine. He had appointed himself an unofficial ambassador for Mr. Thorne and Miss Olivia, as he still called them, correcting anyone who dared repeat the old mountain man's stories. His father, perhaps influenced by his son's unwavering loyalty, had become one of their strongest allies in town governance. As they drove into Maplewood, Olivia noted how different the town looked from her first impressions 5 years ago. Then, it had seemed a place of hostile strangers and painful memories. Now familiar faces waved greeting from shop doorways. Students of Gabriel's called out hellos, and even the buildings themselves seemed more welcoming. The old gristmill at the edge of town had undergone the most dramatic transformation. Once a dilapidated structure slated for demolition, it now stood proud with fresh paint, repaired stonework, and large windows that flooded the interior with natural light. A hand-carved sign above the entrance declared Blackwood Forest Artisan Center in Gabriel's distinctive lettering. Inside, the space had been divided into various workshop areas, gallery spaces, and a central gathering area where demonstrations and classes could be held. Gabriel and Olivia's furniture and carvings formed the centerpiece of the main gallery, but works from other local artisans, weavers, potters, blacksmiths, and quilters were also prominently displayed. The morning passed in a whirlwind of final preparations. Olivia arranged and rearranged her Woodland Guardians display until each piece caught the light perfectly. Gabriel checked the demonstration area where he would be showing basic carving techniques later that day. Volunteers from the high school set up refreshment tables and distributed programs Mrs. Henderson had designed. By noon, everything was ready. As the first visitors began to arrive, townspeople, county officials, artists from neighboring communities, and even a reporter from the regional newspaper, Olivia felt a surge of gratitude so powerful it momentarily overwhelmed her. "You okay?" Gabriel asked quietly, noticing her expression. "Just thinking about how far we've come," Olivia replied. "How different everything is from that night I stumbled through the forest, terrified of the mountain man." Gabriel's eyes crinkled with understanding. "From monster to mentor, not a transformation I ever expected." "You were never a monster," Olivia said firmly. "Just a man who needed to be seen for who he truly was, not who people feared you might be." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Judge Sullivan, elegant as always in a tailored suit, her silver hair swept into a sophisticated updo. Though she had officially retired from the bench 2 years prior, she remained a powerful advocate for foster children and had been instrumental in securing the grant funding that had made the Artisan Center possible. "My 2 favorite success stories," she greeted them warmly. "This place is remarkable. You've created something truly special here." Before either could respond, Sheriff Miller appeared, his uniform pressed and official for the occasion. Beside him stood Ethan, practically vibrating with excitement. "Miss Olivia," Ethan exclaimed, "your carvings are amazing. That fox looks exactly like the one that led me into the ravine. How did you make it look so real?" Olivia smiled at his enthusiasm. "Lots of practice and an excellent teacher," she said, nodding toward Gabriel. "Dad's going to say really good things about you in his speech," Ethan confided in a stage whisper. "He practiced it like 100 times last night." Sheriff Miller looked slightly embarrassed but didn't contradict his son. "The turnout is impressive," he noted instead. "Half the county seems to be here." Indeed, the Artisan Center was rapidly filling with visitors. Among the crowd, Olivia recognized many faces. Mrs. Patterson from the library, who had retired but still volunteered at the school. Ms. Reynolds, the court-appointed advocate who had become a friend. Teachers from the high school. And dozens of townspeople who had gradually shifted from suspicion to acceptance to genuine appreciation of Gabriel's skills and contributions. At 1 o'clock, Sheriff Miller called for attention began the official opening ceremony. Standing on the small platform in the central area, he spoke eloquently about community transformation, second chances, and the power of art to bridge divides. 5 years ago, he said, his voice carrying through the attentive crowd, many of us believed we knew who Gabriel Thorne was, based on rumors and fear rather than fact. We were wrong. He paused, his gaze finding Gabriel in the audience. Today, we celebrate not just the opening of this beautiful facility, but the opening of our minds and hearts to the truth that people are often far more than the stories we tell about them. Applause rippled through the gathering, with several emphatic hears from older townspeople who had been the first to welcome Gabriel back into the community. And, Sheriff Miller continued, we recognize the remarkable young woman whose courage and talent have enriched our town immeasurably. Olivia Thorne reminds us that sometimes the most extraordinary discoveries happen when we ignore warnings and follow our instincts instead. More applause, with Ethan whistling enthusiastically from his place beside his father. Olivia felt her cheeks warm with the unexpected recognition, but Gabriel's proud smile steadied her. The ceremony concluded with Gabriel demonstrating basic wood carving techniques to an attentive audience, followed by an opportunity for visitors to try their hand at simple projects. Throughout the afternoon, Olivia guided people through the galleries, explaining the various works and techniques represented. She found herself particularly drawn to the younger visitors, especially the hesitant ones who needed encouragement to believe in their own creative potential. I could never make something like that, one young girl said wistfully, staring at Olivia's carved owl with its intricate feather details. I thought the same thing when I started, Olivia told her. But my dad showed me that it's not about getting everything perfect from the beginning. It's about learning from each piece you create, seeing what worked and what didn't, and bringing that knowledge to the next project. Your dad is Mr. Thorne? The girl asked, eyes widening. My brother takes his class at school. He says Mr. Thorne is the best teacher ever because he never makes you feel bad when you mess up. Olivia smiled, warmed by this simple but profound testimony to Gabriel's teaching philosophy. That's definitely my dad. He believes mistakes are just part of learning, not something to be ashamed of. As the afternoon progressed, Olivia found herself sharing similar conversations with dozens of visitors, explaining techniques, encouraging tentative beginners, and connecting with experienced craftspeople who recognized the exceptional quality of her work. It was a role she hadn't anticipated enjoying so much, this sharing of knowledge and passion that Gabriel had modeled for her over the years. During a quiet moment, she found herself beside the large picture window overlooking the forest edge, watching as sunlight filtered through the autumn leaves in patterns of gold and amber. A presence beside her made her turn, Judge Sullivan observing her with thoughtful eyes. "You've found your path," the judge said. It wasn't a question. Olivia nodded. "I have. Though it's not the one anyone would have predicted 5 years ago." "The best paths rarely are," Judge Sullivan replied. "When I placed you with Gabriel, there were colleagues who thought I was making a terrible mistake. A single man, isolated, the subject of disturbing rumors. On paper, it looked like a recipe for disaster. Why did you do it then?" Olivia asked, genuinely curious about a question she'd never thought to ask before. The judge's smile was reflective. "Because I knew Gabriel before the fire, before the rumors. I saw how he was with Eleanor and Lily, patient, kind, completely devoted. And I saw how you were with him from the very beginning, not afraid, but trusting in a way you hadn't been with any of your previous placements." She paused, gazing out at the forest. Sometimes the legal system focuses so much on checking boxes and following procedures that it misses the human element. "I took a chance on what I observed rather than what the paperwork suggested." "Thank you," Olivia said simply. "You changed both our lives with that decision." "You did the changing yourselves," Judge Sullivan corrected gently. "I just provided the opportunity." As evening approached, the crowd thinned, leaving just the core group of supporters who had been with them from the beginning: Mrs. Henderson, Sheriff Miller and Ethan, Judge Sullivan, and several of Gabriel's most dedicated students. They gathered around the large table in the workshop area, sharing impressions of the day over coffee and Mrs. Henderson's blackberry muffins. "I counted over 200 visitors," Mrs. Henderson announced proudly. "And the guest book is filled with comments, all positive." "The reporter from the Regional Times seemed impressed," Sheriff Miller added. "He took lots of photos, especially of your woodland creatures, Olivia." Ethan, who had appointed himself official counter of sales, reported excitedly, 17 pieces sold, and Miss Olivia got commissions for 6 more. The success of the day was beyond anything they had anticipated. But as Olivia watched Gabriel interact with these people who had become their extended family, she realized that the true victory wasn't measured in sales or visitor numbers. It was in the natural ease with which Gabriel now moved through social interactions that would have been impossible 5 years ago. It was in the genuine respect in Sheriff Miller's eyes, the affection in Mrs. Henderson's fussing, the pride in Judge Sullivan's quiet observation. The mountain man was gone, consigned to the realm of fading legend. In his place stood Gabriel Thorne, teacher, craftsman, father, friend, fully integrated into the community that had once feared him, now valued for exactly who he was. Later that night, after the drive back up the mountain with Mrs. Henderson, after the excited recounting of the day's highlights, Olivia and Gabriel sat on their expanded porch in the comfortable silence they had perfected over years of companionship. The dogs lounged around them, occasionally sighing in contentment or shifting positions in their sleep. "I've been thinking," Olivia said finally, "about what happens next." Gabriel turned to her, attentive but not pressing. They had discussed her future often over the past year: the scholarship offers from art schools, the apprenticeship opportunities with master carvers, the possibility of expanding her presence in galleries beyond their region. "I've made a decision," she continued. "I want to accept the partial scholarship to the Arts Institute in Burlington. It's close enough that I can come home on weekends, but it will give me the technical training to take my work to the next level." Gabriel nodded, his expression a mixture of pride and the inevitable touch of sadness that comes with approaching change. "It's an excellent program. Their woodworking department is one of the best in the Northeast. And," Olivia added, "I want to establish a scholarship program through the Artisan Center for kids who wouldn't otherwise have access to arts education. Kids like me, who need a safe place to create and belong." Gabriel's smile deepened. "That's a wonderful idea. We could start with summer workshops, perhaps expand to after-school programs during the year." "We," Olivia repeated, emphasizing the word. "That's the most important part. Whatever paths I explore, whatever new directions my work takes me, this will always be home. You will always be family." Gabriel reached over to squeeze her hand, his eyes bright with emotion. "I never thought I'd have a second chance at being a father," he said softly. "After Lily died, I believed that part of my life was over forever. But you changed everything, Olivia. We changed each other." Olivia corrected gently. "You taught me to trust again after my parents died, to believe in possibilities instead of fears. I hope I helped you remember that isolation isn't the answer to pain. You did far more than that," Gabriel said. "You reminded me of who I really was, beneath the grief and bitterness. You saw me clearly when everyone else saw only the monster they had created in their minds." The night deepened around them, stars emerging in the velvet sky above Blackwood Forest. In the distance, an owl called, perhaps the very one Olivia had captured so beautifully in wood. The dogs shifted in their sleep, secure in the knowledge that they were home, they were safe, they were loved. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't run away that night?" Olivia asked. "If I hadn't believed the mountain man? Stories enough to be afraid, but not enough to stay away." Gabriel considered this, his face thoughtful in the porch light's soft glow. I believe there are moments in life that serve as crossroads, though we rarely recognize them at the time. Your decision to enter the forest that night, my choice to help you rather than send you back to town immediately, those were pivotal moments that set us on this path. I'm glad I was brave enough to be afraid, Olivia said, the paradox making perfect sense to both of them. And I'm grateful I was still capable of seeing beyond my own pain to recognize yours, Gabriel added. They fell silent again, comfortable in the shared understanding that had grown between them over 5 years of building a life together. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the logistics of Olivia's education, the expansion of the artisan center's programs, the ongoing process of creating beauty from raw materials. But the foundation they had built would support whatever structures they chose to raise upon it. The legacy of the mountain man, that fearsome creature who had supposedly lurked in Blackwood Forest waiting to devour children, had been transformed into something entirely different. Now the stories told in Maplewood were about the master craftsman who taught children to create with their hands, who rescued lost dogs and gave them homes, whose quiet courage had shown an entire community the power of seeing beyond fear too. Truth. As for Olivia, the frightened girl who had once fled into Forbidden's woods because she had nowhere else to go, she had found not just safety but purpose, not just shelter but home. Her journey had taught her that sometimes the most dangerous path leads to the greatest salvation, and that family can be found in the most unexpected places, even in the cabin of a man the world had mistaken for a monster. The night wrapped around them like a familiar blanket, secure and comforting. Tomorrow would bring its own adventures, its own challenges, its own opportunities for growth. But tonight, in this moment of quiet reflection, both Gabriel and Olivia knew with absolute certainty that whatever the future held, they would face it together, the man who fed stray puppies at dawn and the girl who had been brave enough to see him for who he truly was. And in that knowledge, they found peace. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.